it really resonates with me to hear you say ACT Foundation is interested in just not doing good but also supporting the process of philanthropy, supporting the process of implementing partners that work with them over the years. I'll be coming back to you, Gima, to just really kickstart the conversation as to in what ways you have seen the practice of giving, as we are calling it, right? Philanthropy mean giving to us. How have you seen the practice of giving in Africa sort of evolve over time? You do have some experience, not just 1 or 2 years in development practice. So what insights could you share? How have you seen, what changes might you have seen, over time in how giving in Africa is carried out?
Okay, thank you, Eme. I think the first thing for me, is to note that giving and solidarity is really ingrained in our way of life as Africans. And it is a fact that people have been giving and continue to give to different causes in different ways. Some do give their time, some give their goods and services, while others do give money. So it's very important that whenever we talk about giving, we try and underline that we're not just talking about money, especially as it relates to giving by Africa. And we are also a communal-centric people, so we like to support our families and communities. And so this has been going on for as long as we can remember. It's an age-long tradition, and it's part and parcel of every African society. And we give to individuals, we give to groups that we belong to, and to the wider community. Now, the thing is that a lot of this giving and solidarity across Africa has really been at small scale and responding to immediate needs of our groups, communities, and even at an individual level. And again, most of this traditional giving has really not been structured in the way that we think of organized giving today. And so it has not gotten a lot of attention in the literature and write-up about giving. But one thing is very clear, that giving through the different methods in which Africans have been giving over the centuries have contributed in advancing our communities, and the impact at the level of groups and individuals are clearly something which we can see. Now, over the last decade, there's been a push towards more organized, or what some people call structured giving, in confronting some of the challenges that are faced in parts of the continent. And as a result of this, we now see that there's a growth in the number of foundations and similar institutions that are giving in a more organized manner. And the major trend in giving, I would say, is that people in the continent have continued to give, and we are giving more. And as a result of that, we can see philanthropy is growing. In a sense, it seems like we are becoming more charitable. As they say, more Africans are also becoming more affluent. And the first in this direction is that we can see that there's a growing number of philanthropic institutions being set up by Africans, to expand the threshold of giving in the continent. But also there is a growth in the number of high net worth individuals on the continent. And this is reflected in the number of large donations by Africans to philanthropic causes. In fact, there's been an increase in large-scale giving and donation by high net worth individuals across the continent over the last 3 decades. And this has been captured in research. I think in 2020, a research-based group in South Africa, Bridgespan, they conducted a research on the landscape and scale of giving by African philanthropists between 2010 and 2019. And 3 things stood out clear from the research as it regards high net worth individuals in Africa. The first point was that their giving is mainly to their own countries. So in a sense, charity begins at home. And that the giving has been focused on the basic needs of people. And we do agree that in a lot of our communities, people are still struggling with their basic needs. So it only makes sense that, they should be giving in that direction. And the third one, which I also found very interesting, was that their giving has been largely to the public sector and to their own foundation, and less so to NGOs. So I'm coming from the NGO background. I keep wondering, why is it that, less of this giving is going to NGOs? But another important thing about, something that has evolved with our giving over the last few years is that with the outbreak of COVID-19, the continent also witnessed a lot of amounts of giving. So there's a significant increase in the amount of large gifts, and large gift here, we're talking about gifts of $1 million and above that were donated by Africans to different causes in the continent. Now, that same research by Bridgespan Group in South Africa observed that between 2010 and 2019, there was a whole lot of giving in that direction. But in 2020 in particular, the large gift by African philanthropists was 7 times higher than the average over the past decade. So for me, when I look at all of this, there's only one good conclusion. And for me, the good news here is that there is an evolving practice of giving, which is true, that now we have more Africans setting up institutions that are tied around Western foundations to give in a structured manner. But all of this is only going to complement the traditional ways in which Africans have been giving. Because like I said at the beginning, we are a communal-centric people. We give at individual and group level and have continued to do so. So this development around high net worth individuals, setting up foundation and similar institutions and giving to different causes is good, is welcome. But we must always look at those and keep in mind that people have been giving in different traditional ways and continue to do so. So this evolving way of giving is just complementing what we have been doing for centuries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gima. And I'm so glad that you were able to touch on so many points that even as an organization, we have also begun to see. Bridgespan has an amazing resource. And this is just a shout out to the Bridgespan group. They are doing amazing work. Their research is really insightful, and they've been helping to also build data sets around African philanthropy. Thank you for that. And I do know that even as the director in Tirada Danjuma Foundation, Tirada Danjuma is also proactively trying to engage with non-profits around Nigeria, proactively trying to ensure that monies go directly to them. So I know that a certain point didn't cover them, so to speak. I'll be turning now to Grace, because Gima did mention around local traditional modes of African giving. And I would just like to see how you believe community philanthropy, which I believe is something KCDF, supports and elevates. How should it be elevated as a response to sparse funding, right, that we see from high net worth individuals, based on the research and statistics that have been brought up?
Yeah, thanks, Emmy, for that. In terms, the way I look at it is that community foundations should not be seen to replace, but probably we should look at it in terms of how can we all be gearing towards increasingly working together to address the social challenges we face in Africa. So even as high net worth individuals, they are rising in Africa, even as Gima has said, there needs to be an encouragement for them to give back to help alleviate the challenges that are there within society. But for community foundations, we see this model as a very sustainable and a very inclusive approach to addressing development issues. And what do I mean here? A community foundation is simply put a grouping of people who come together. They're brought together either by looking at a geographical area or a common challenge they're looking at, and therefore put resources to addressing that. And so by a community coming together and saying, we have a challenge, for instance, with regards to access to water, what can we do about this? How can we raise resources to address these issues? How can we work together to even bring more resources on board to address this issue? Simply put, that's a community foundation. And so the more that we organize better our giving and our solving of social problems, the more sustainable this would be. Because that grouping is also able to hold government accountable, is able to actually say to government, for instance, you are to provide water, but you're failing to provide water. We are only bridging an immediate need, but we need to continue, whether they need to lobby the government or they need to put pressure on government to then provide that social need. So for community foundations, they go to the extent of bringing people together in solidarity to address issues, raising resources to address it. But I don't see it as it won't replace the place of high net worth individuals, because there'll always be a place for that. And as Africa continues to grow, economies continue to grow, even with the challenges we have faced over the last 2 years, you still have high net worth individuals, that band growing. And with that, you can see there's increasing inequality. So being able to have those high net worth individuals still contributing to societal issues is still very important. But definitely the place for community foundations and growth of that for us to better organize our giving and our working together is also extremely important. Thank you, Eme.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I really look forward to how much more work would be done in bringing together community foundations, in really just rallying support for community foundations, in rallying support around how we can elevate their voice, like you've said, how various policy and stakeholders could come together to ensure that the work that is being done at local levels are really being strengthened and are really being built. I'm facing you, Nana, for now, and then just asking if there is a need to reassess current philanthropic practice on the continent. Based on your work with WAXI, I know, and then the fact that you are part of a lot of systems thinking and systems change initiatives, I'd just like to hear your thoughts around the direction current philanthropic practice is going and what you think around possibly reimagining the systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eme. So I think that a number of things that we need to be looking at a lot more. Grace mentioned, for example, when we are talking about the high net worth individuals, how do we incentivize them to give more, to support development? Now, I would want us to look at development holistically. So when many of our high net worth individuals are already giving, and many of them towards economic development, empowerment, I think we should look at human development. And so add the issues around social justice, social accountability, social protection, and look at it holistically. So I'm talking about giving towards that as well. I think that incentivizing them means that we need to be looking at our tax systems, for example. And how do we have the kind of tax systems that incentivize our high net worth individuals? That's one area. And when we talk about philanthropy, it's not only high net worth individuals, but when we talk about African philanthropy, all of us are philanthropists. So what do we do to support, enable that kind of consciousness and willingness to give, to support development generally? And that means having the kind of infrastructure that would, encourage, enable people to give, and the tax system goes with it. We also have to look at, I have talked a lot about, I mentioned earlier, the fact that we must look at the philosophy that underpins our giving as Africans. And here maybe I may be talking a bit philosophically or theoretically, but really, if you look at what has been written and researched so far on African philanthropy, there are certain values that we have. One is the communalism that has been talked about, the communalistic spirit, the Ubuntu, the fact that I am because you are. We are working together for each other. We are losing that as Africans. We are becoming more and more individualistic. And so there's a need for us to invest in bringing back that kind of culture and belief in our system as one, as Africans. And that means engaging the systems that nurture us, our communities, our schools, our religious institutions. They have to, support that kind of communalistic spirit, because that underpins our giving in many ways. Our giving is not transactional. It is transformative. Yes, we look for reciprocity in our giving, but when we give, we expect that it would go to support the community. So we need to build community. And that is a very fundamental thing that we are losing and we need to address. And I think that's one of the areas that has to be addressed. I try to put down some of the things I have thought about when it comes to looking at high net worth individuals. I think one of the challenges for high net worth individuals, when you particularly address the issues around social justice and them supporting a lot of the work there, is because a lot of them, the businesses that they do, many or very often are tied to government. Our governments are our biggest employers. And therefore, for them to come out and, to address some of these issues, some of which are holding government to account, is really risky for them. And therefore, that is the reason why you will find that many of them are not necessarily supporting NGOs, particularly those that are working in the sectors that may be seen as risky. And therefore, we have to think of ways to address this if we want to get more of our high net worth individuals supporting our work in these areas, which are fundamental to having the kind of peace and security that we need in our countries. So, for example, can we look at some way of anonymizing? And if I say anonymizing, it's not about hiding the names necessarily, but perhaps if we have high net worth individuals pooling their funds and coming together, they don't have to then stand alone and to face, that kind of flack from government, because they would have others supporting them. So can we have high net worth individuals, for example, pooling their funds to support social justice work? Can we have high net worth individuals using intermediaries? So it is not them supporting directly, but they could give their funding to intermediaries to support, social justice work and social accountability work. Can we have high net worth individuals supporting ecosystem strengthening? So instead of giving their funding to an organization that is working on corruption to deal with the corruption project, for example, could they support the institution, strengthen the institutions that do this kind of work? Could we have them giving untied, non-earmarked funding? Because if you are supporting, for example, a KCDF, and you are giving KCDF funding as a high net worth individual, KCDF does many projects. So you could give that funding without necessarily tying that. Could they, for example, pay directly for service support? Organizations find it very challenging because of the kind of donor system, funding system that we are in. If you are looking at the work of organizations working in this space, to sometimes pay for audits because they are very expensive, legal fees because they are very expensive. Can we have high net worth individuals directly paying for some of these things to support organizations working in this space? So that is one area. Another thing that I think that we could do in reassessing and looking at our whole philanthropic system is technology. How are we using technology? Individual giving, and there are people who really are going out of their way to give and would be happy to support, whether it's charitable causes or, social justice causes, they are ready to give. But sometimes there are no channels for them to give. So how do we come up with the kind of channels that would be easily accessible and available for them to use to be able to give? And to give to some of the foundations, the local foundations that we've set in Ghana, for example, we have the Star Ghana Foundation, and the others like that who support, civil society work. Innovative ideas. I heard about an idea that blew my mind when I heard it, and it still resonates with me till today, where in Switzerland, you could have young people volunteer their time to look after older people. And the time that they volunteer goes into a bank. So when they grow up and are old, they have young people withdrawing that deposit of time that they had made to look after them. And so in a way, they are giving, but also getting back from that giving, and it's revolving. And it's not money, it's time, but it's banked. Can we think of innovative ideas like this, where, for example, you have some of our professionals who may not have time or may not even have the money to give, but could sometimes maybe be able to give something, if it's 1 hour of their time or something like that, put it in a bank that where, there can be withdrawals. So that is one thing. I also have a whole thing about our diaspora and how we can engage them a lot more. Remittances. I mean, if you look at the kind of support, and I'm talking directly about money first, coming into Africa, it is much, much higher than the aid that we receive. In 2019 alone, we are talking about $48 billion in remittances, with Nigeria leading that. In South Sudan, 1.3 billion in remittances. That was I think about 30% of their GDP. Now, it is a huge revenue source. How do we structure this in a way that it does continue to support individual families, but we also find a way of using part of that funding to support our development as a nation? And it's not only about those in the diaspora giving their money. Sometimes it's also about their time and their skill. Because it also looks like all we want from them is money. No, they have a lot more to offer and a lot more to gain from us having a stable, sustainable, prosperous, peaceful continent. So how do we engage them? And I don't think that we've done a lot when it comes to addressing that. And that's because we have not spent a lot of time researching and also thinking through what are the kind of models that would work for us when it comes to local philanthropy, beyond the Eurocentric ones that we know. So for me, that would be some of the things that I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. There's just so much to unpack from all you've said, especially how you ended, because that really speaks to something that we are trying to do at Philanthropy Circuit. And I already feel like there could be just lots of follow-up conversations, around what we need to unpack around engaging philanthropists for Africa development, and just creating maybe creating newer practice around how we carry out African philanthropy, if that's what needs to be done at the end of the day. I'll be moving on to you now, Ndifreke. Hopefully you're still with us. But I would just like to know, based on your experience as a grant-making organization, and just so you know, I do reference Axe Foundation a lot because you guys have amazing practice when I'm in certain rooms and carrying out certain conversations. But I would like to know what you think African philanthropists, just to pick your brain on what you think African philanthropists can do differently based on your experience, and then how you engage with philanthropists across the continent.
Thank you again, Eme. It's really been interesting listening to Nana, listening to Gima and Grace, just share thoughts. And these thoughts are things that we're constantly thinking about as an organization that is providing funding to the space, or in the space on the continent. When thinking through this, a few things came to mind, and when thinking about it as well, there are things that some philanthropists or donor organizations are doing, and some we are not doing that we need to improve on. There's a lot work that needs to go into philanthropy when we think about it from an African context, in terms of how to structure it so that it gives us the most benefits at the end of the day. One of the things that we have seen when we look at philanthropy, when we look at donor organizations and grant making as a whole, as a foundation, has been the need to institutionalize giving. So when we think about how we give as Africans, is great because giving is good, right? It solves problems. However, there's a need for us to think about how do we put the right structures around giving, because we have seen situations where we have given and the money has been misused. The funding hasn't gotten to the right sources. It has stopped with organizations and hasn't gotten to the grassroots, to the vulnerable communities that we require. So there's a need to put the right structures around giving. And with this, I want to agree with Gima. When Gima was talking about the Bridgespan survey, which we're also involved in, one of the things that struck out was how much we were giving, but we were kind of giving selfishly, if I could put it that way. We would, philanthropists or individuals, high net worth individuals, would provide funding to their foundations to implement interventions that would benefit their business in the long term. So you give, and you're hoping that in the process of giving or running a particular project by your organization, it brings more business to your organization. We need to think of giving because we want to solve problems and ensure that we are creating change, sustainable change in our communities. That's the reason we are giving. If we are giving because we want it to directly benefit our business so we can make more money, we need to rethink that strategy. Another thing with that is the need for institutions to put the right structures in place. A lot of high network individuals or foundations are implementing interventions themselves. And what we find is that a lot of times it is not necessarily their strong points. They do not have the right skills to implement this and reach the sort of people that they could reach potentially if we could collaborate more. So one of the things that from our end that we have seen that has added a lot of value, that we think that it's important that I mentioned at this session, is that we need to collaborate more. We can't do this alone. ACT Foundation as an organization provides funding. In the past 5 years of our doing this work, we have worked with 75 different non-profit organizations and implemented over 100 different interventions. We've reached over 2 million people. We've worked in about 7 African countries. We definitely couldn't have done that ourselves. If we went out to say we're going to implement interventions, malaria interventions, cancer interventions, it will take us a few years to get to where we are getting to now. But that ability to collaborate, that thinking around is not just about me. Who has the skill? Who is doing it well? How can I work with Grace? How can I work with T.Y. Danjuma? How can I work with Waxy? How can we do this to ensure that while you are in your community doing the work, you've built certain skills, how do we support you and work with you to ensure that we increase that impact? That's what we need, philanthropists need to think about. It's not just about creating the foundations. It's not about just saying, oh, we give the money. What's the structure around the giving? And I want to also agree with Nana when Nana talked about how we give. We give to specific things. We are not thinking about the sustainability of the organizations that we're working with. Philanthropists need to do differently. We need to do better. And this is donor organizations, individuals. We give funding directly to projects. And we do not think about how does the organizations we are funding, how do they survive? One of the things that we are very passionate about the foundation is getting non-profits to rethink their business model and look at it not just from wanting to collect grants and funding all the time, but look for sustainable ways that they can run their organizations. However, in high network individuals, philanthropists, donor organizations are utilizing the services of NGOs, social enterprises to make impact in their communities. If you're utilizing their services, you should pay them for the services. What sort of structure do you have in place to support the growth and sustainability of that organization? What we say to ourselves at the foundation is that if we fund an organization once and 1 year or 2 years down the line, they do not exist anymore, then we have put money down the hole. That investment is gone because we still need to do an evaluation, we still need to do an impact assessment, we still need to look at what have we done with that organization over time. And when we get to that point where we need to, they don't exist anymore because there was not the right support system around promoting organizational sustainability of the organization. So that's something else that philanthropists need to carefully look at. If we're going to work with a consulting firm to implement an intervention, they will bill you, they'll charge you for the service, they're providing the service to you. So why are we thinking that because non-profits are not for profits, they should do everything for free? It doesn't work. They are an organization, they are a social enterprise. They need to be able to sustain themselves, even though they themselves also need to think through systems to make themselves sustainable. But the grant makers, the donors, cannot excuse that. And then you find that a lot of the African grant makers or philanthropies tend to cut off that administrative part. But you find that when you're looking for international funding, a lot of that is covered. Why can't we learn from that and see how we can build these institutions, build these organizations so they can continue to do great work? Another thing that we think that I personally think that philanthropies need to do differently is with regards providing funding for advocacy and policy issues. Nana mentioned this as well when she was talking about social justice issues. A lot of times you find that high network individuals, due to their portfolio and the sort of investments they've made, there are certain issues that they want to stay clear of, even though they themselves might be passionate about it. But how does it affect their business, right? How does this affect? So because of that, they stay away. Can you fund the organizations that are actually working in this space to continue to push? Because what happens is that you enable them to maintain reputation for independence and legitimacy. So we must provide funding for advocacy and policy issues. The last thing I want to emphasize on that African philanthropists need to do differently is with regards funding research and development. A lot of the research that we find about our continent and the work that we do here are coming from the West, from Europe. And they are doing this research to help them better understand how they can work with us. Why are we not doing enough research and sharing it so we know what our challenges are as it affects us? At the foundation over the past few years, we've started to focus a lot more on that, funding research. We think that it's important that we as Africans understand the challenges and contribute to solving the challenges. But at the end of the day, where is the funding going to come from? We want the information, we must fund it. So I want to encourage philanthropists to think through some of these things and see how can we improve on this process to ensure that we are able to do more and we can create sustainable impact on the continent.
Thank you so much, Ndifreke. Thank you. And I'm also glad that you ended on a research note, because I do know, and I have noted that ACT is currently trying to, really bring that research out. I see the reports that have been created. ACT Foundation has amazing reports that have been coming out of the organization, and I would really encourage everyone to check in and see the work that they are doing. And really just goes across board. Same thing, WAXI has really been at the forefront of ensuring that there is research made available. KCDF also is doing great work. Grace, I would just like to, I know we're a bit past time, and I want to respect everyone's time, and so I would want to have like a sort of, just reflections across board before we end, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute each, but just to say, I know Ndifreke has spoken to what she believes African philanthropists can do, but maybe if Grace and Grace and Gima, you could also just touch points on that as we round up. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. You want me to go first or Gima to go first?
Please go ahead, Grace.
Okay, great. I think, we've gotten so much rich insights, from all the speakers here, from Nana, from Ndi, from Gima. I think there are things we know, and there are things that we need to now put into place. We've been having conversations around tax incentives for high net worth individuals, for philanthropists generally. And so how can we ensure that across board, we're working towards putting in place these great ideas that we have manufactured here today? So I would hope that our next conversation will be action. So what are we doing now moving forward? For the great insights that we have gotten, the research is available. How can we now move into action? For me, that would be my call to action. How can we move into action now? And sharing our stories, because across Africa, there are rich stories that we should continue to share. There are diverse platforms around that, but I don't think there's any harm in continually sharing our stories and our struggles, where we're struggling. And in that conversation, that's how we're going to be able to get solutions. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Gima, please go ahead.
Thank you, Emma. I think that Nana had also touched on this briefly. It is very important going forward that we push and encourage more people to invest some more in social justice philanthropy. It's very important because a lot of the problems that have been tackled by NGOs are things created by the system. And for a lot of cases, we are dealing with the symptoms. If we have a lot more investment that is targeted at the root causes, dealing with the issues of social justice that are actually at the base of a lot of these problems, I think will be helping advance society a whole lot more. Then I couldn't agree more with Ndifreke on the research and documentation part of our work. And this is something which also the Ndifreke Foundation will be doing going forward. We are actually working on a new strategic plan, and we are trying to incorporate that component of it, which will be research and documentation, to make sure that we build our knowledge base. Thank you.
Emma, you are muted.
You're muted.
Oh, I've done it again. Okay, but I was just saying thank you so much, Gima, and I know that we are past time. Okay, I wasn't quite sure. Thank you so much to everyone who has stuck with us through the hour, and we hope, like Grace said, that we're able to move from just conversations into action. I would also encourage everyone who would love to check on the organizations and the speakers, of course, who have made themselves available today. They are doing amazing work for Africa. They are doing amazing work within African philanthropy, and we are proud to be able to bring them on to Catalyzing Change Week and to have them speak to these issues, because I know for a fact that they are also working and they are doing the work, right? They're also acting out what they're saying. If there will be anything that you would need, we'll be following up with the recording. Please feel free to share, feel free to connect. I'm hoping that you've been able to note persons, even participants who you'll be willing to collaborate with, based on those who have made introductions. I'm hoping that connections will be fostered via this conversation. And I'm also hoping that you check into our Nigeria chapter launch later. That's coming up 1 p.m. of UAT. We would love to have as many people who can make it there. Thank you all so much for your time. I'll be handing over to Melissa. Maybe I believe there might be a slide she wants to put up or something that she might want to end with. I see there are things going up in the chat too, but please let us know. Otherwise, thank you once again. And then I'm signing out, everyone. Have a wonderful time and a great rest of the day. Bye, everyone.